Casper was an observant little boy. As he roamed about the swamp, he saw something strange in the lake. Casper walked closer to inspect. It was air bubbles rising from the lake. He went home puzzled. The next day, he visited the lake and saw the air bubbles again. After 2 months, Casper decided that enough was enough. He had to investigate. Hello everyone, and welcome to another gripping episode of our stories. Subscribe to our channel for more of these amazing stories. Make sure to like this video before we dive into the details. Adventure was always on little Casper's agenda. A walk in the swamp was always bound to lead to something interesting. One sunny day, he noticed some tracks. They were a band of treads, the kind tractors leave behind. But what was a tractor doing in the swamp? As a regular visitor, he would have seen, or at least heard it going. Curious little Casper followed the tracks. They led straight to the kurtna matasjarv lake. The boy walked the length of the lake, trying to find a place where the tracks led out of the lake, but he couldn't find any. It was as though it was some phantom machine that had appeared out of or disappeared into the lake. Then he noticed something rather odd about the lake. Air bubbles emerged from the bottom as if there was something or someone drowning. 2 months passed, and the bubbling was still there. It was time to get to the bottom of this mystery. After alerting his parents about the strange lake, he shared the incident with the leader of the local war history club, Singh. Mr. Igor Shedunov was amazed by what the boy had to say. Together with the other club members, he decided to look into the matter. The group came upon the lake and inspected the area. The boy was right. There appeared to be something submerged in the water. They wondered if it was the boat of some unfortunate soul who went for a leisurely ride on the lake. Casper found a rope leading into the lake, and he tried tugging on it. Nothing happened. The men noticed Casper's efforts and joined in to help. By now, a large group had gathered, but no one could pull out whatever was in the lake. Now everyone wanted to know what was hidden beneath the lake. The club initiated diving expeditions to the bottom of the lake to uncover this mystery. What they discovered astonished everyone. Resting at a depth of 7 meters, buried in 3 meters of peat, was something no one was expecting to find. Now, it was absolutely necessary to pull this mysterious object out, but it was clear that a couple of people won't be able to even make it budge. And so, the operations began. Enthusiasts from the club contacted a company to rent out a bulldozer. The pulling operation began at 9 in the morning. The villagers chipped in as well, digging away the dirt and making sure that the bulldozer did not slip. They didn't want the rented bulldozer to be sucked up by the lake as well. Hours passed. For a while, it seemed an impossible task. Whoever sunk this object clearly had no plans of retrieving it later. Eventually though, they started making progress. Everyone doubled their efforts to pull this mystery out. Around 3 in the evening, the operation ended. They finally pulled it out. What stood before them was beyond surprising. It was almost impossible. Hiding beneath the lake's surface was a war tank, out in the open after nearly 56 years. The weight of this fully armed tank was around 30 tons. No wonder it was so difficult to drag it out of the lake. But how did a World War II tank end up in a remote Estonian swamp, covered in layers and layers of algae, and caked with mud? This once intimidating war machine now stood in a pool of muddy water, sad and dejected. The villagers, with renewed energy, began clearing the tank up. This was a historical discovery, and everyone wanted to get to the bottom of whatever secrets this beast held. They cleaned the tank up and opened the hatch. Casper was so excited. Who knew that his ramblings would lead him to something like this? He waded through the crowd to get a closer look at the tank. The hatch was opened, and in went Casper. How many young boys in this century can say they've been inside a World War II war tank? No less, a tank which they discovered. The explorations began. Everyone was astonished at how well preserved the tank was. Spending so many years underwater, it wasn't even rusted. Casper saw something shiny in the cabin and sped towards it. They seemed like bullets, huge bullets. To everyone's horror, there was ammunition rolling around the cabin. Given the excellent condition of the tank, there was a possibility that they were live ammunition. Altogether, 116 shells were found on board. The curious endeavors had, in a heartbeat, turned into a deadly mission. Soon enough, the sounds of oncoming sirens were heard, followed by a camouflaged truck and armed men. The villagers stood in shock and fear. Someone had called the authorities. They wondered in alarm as to what kind of trouble they had unearthed with such effort. But no one seemed angry at the discovery. In fact, the authorities were in awe as much as the people were. What was this war tank? How did it end up drowned in a remote swamp? The mystery was just unfolding. The tank was the talk of the town. Everyone clamored to take photos with this historical find. The gnawing questions were now whispered around. What was the story behind this sunken war machine? The symbols on the tank made it evident that it belonged to the German army. But what was perplexing was that the tank was of Russian build, not German. To be precise, this was a Soviet-built T-34/76A tank. The T-34 was a prime element of Soviet forces during the war. By its design, it was able to meet the changing requirements of the Eastern Front continuously. The longer the war went on, the more capable the T-34 became. It was also cheaper and easier to produce. The authorities speculated that the tank had been captured from the Soviets and repainted by the Germans. Eventually, 80,000 of these tanks would be produced by the Soviets. This allowed them to steadily increase their numbers, although this tank was one of the 1,000 T-34s that were lost on the battlefield. From February to September 1944, this war tank partook in the heavy battles on the narrow, 50-kilometer wide Narva front in the northeastern part of Estonia. Over 100,000 men lost their lives, and 300,000 men were wounded during those gruesome battles. The tank was then captured from the Soviet army during the battles in the summer of 1944. That's how the tank received its German markings. But the Germans did not use it for long. Towards mid-September, German troops began to retreat. The tank was then driven into the lake, purposefully drowning it to prevent it from being retaken and used by the advancing Soviet army. All this history meant that this tank was not an ordinary war machine. Although more than 75 years after the fighting, both Soviet and German tanks are being lifted from the marshes like in Belarus. None were tanks that had fought for both camps. This tank had seen many battles through the eyes of the Soviets as well as the Germans and survived to recount its adventures. But there were more surprises to come. The tank was taken to the War Museum in the village of Gorodenko. They prepared for a long restoration process since the tank was decades old and had spent most of its time underwater. They were astonished at what they found. The tank was in excellent condition. They were even able to start the diesel engine without needing any spare parts. All systems were in good working condition. Given the pristine state of the tank, restoration was not at all a hassle, and the tank was fully restored in 2007. It is now on display at the Gorodenko Museum. Walking by the museum, Casper can proudly say that he took part in bringing to life a valuable historical relic. Who would have thought that his everyday strolls would lead him to such treasure? What the villagers believed to be some drowned boat soon became a centerpiece at a museum. What would you have done if you came across strange air bubbles in a swamp lake? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to give us a like. subscribe to our channel for more astounding stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.